beauty and diverse history.
It's 7:30 in the evening across India. I'm Tanvi Taneja. We are live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Global. We'll bring you all the day's big stories from across India and the world. And with me today from Washington, D.C. is my colleague, Nick Harper. Hi, Nick.
Thanks, Tanvi, and hello from Washington, where it's 10 a.m. and 4 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we'll be covering the latest tensions between China and Taiwan, and we'll be heading to New York, where the UN General Assembly High-Level Week is getting underway. But first, the headlines.
World leaders seek to salvage stalled global targets at the 78th United Nations General Assembly session in New York. The high-level general debate starts Tuesday. The US and Iran free 5 prisoners each. $6 billion in Iranian funds now transferred from South Korea to Qatar. The situation in Libya is far from being stable, says UN human rights body. Derna's mayor confirms 20,000 people may have died. Taiwan's defense ministry on Monday urged China to stop what it called destructive unilateral action after reporting a sharp rise in Chinese military activities near the island. The ministry said that since Sunday, it has spotted 103 Chinese military aircraft over the sea, a number it called a recent high, referring to China's Air Force and Navy. Taiwan's defense ministry said that July to September is traditionally the busiest season for Chinese military drills along the coast. Of the total number of warplanes detected, 40 crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait that separates the self-ruled island from China and entered its southwestern and southeastern air defense identification zone. So as tensions grow between Taiwan and China claims the territory as its own, and Chinese jet planes fly over the independent island regularly, but in lesser numbers. DD India's correspondent Patrick Falk has more from Hong Kong.
Well, limited signs, as the US suggested, but these sorts of incidents around Taiwan really underscore the importance for that military-to-military communication. Remember, Taiwan called it harassment and said that it would sharpen tensions and potentially cause regional or worsen regional stability. And, you know, there has been an interesting development in recent days, though, with reports suggesting that the Chinese Defense Minister, Li Shangfu, may have been purged from the Chinese government. The US says it believes that he's been relieved of command, possibly due to some sort of corruption probe. Now, remember, he had been sanctioned by Washington, and the Chinese had just suggested in the past that that was a stumbling block to re-engaging on military-to-military talks. So without him in the way now, that could pave the way for that dialogue to resume, although you might say that with the state of relations between the two countries, it still won't be an easy process.
And on to America now. World leaders this week will seek to salvage stalled global targets at the 2-day Sustainable Development Goals SDG Summit starting in New York today, just as the 78th session of the UN General Assembly also kickstarts in the city. My colleague Nick Harper is in Washington and gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Nick, over to you.
Thanks, Tanvi. The 78th session of the UN General Assembly is getting underway, with the big speeches from world leaders starting tomorrow, Tuesday the 19th. They're gathering to join the annual general debate that's being held during the course of this week, where climate change and the war in Ukraine will be the priorities. More than 140 leaders and state representatives will present their ideas for the coming year. At the Sustainable Development Goals Summit, also being held in New New York this week. Global leaders are meeting to review the agenda for 2030 and the 17 targets that they're trying to achieve. The ongoing war in Ukraine, pandemic preparedness and the climate crisis will be in sharp focus at the UN this week. The UN also hopes to get the Sustainable Development Goals back on track. DD India's William Denslow reports from UN headquarters in New York.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is urging world leaders coming here to UN headquarters for high-level week of the UN General Assembly. Now, of course, it will be an incredibly busy week of diplomacy here at the UN, and there's real hope that we can build on some of the momentum gained during the recent G20 in India, especially when it comes to ambitions from the international community to build a more cohesive, brighter, healthier future for populations around the world. Of course, we'll see the start of world leaders giving speeches to the international community starting on Tuesday. One major headline will be the address by Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky here at UN headquarters. Of course, there will also be a major high-level UN Security Council meeting on the topic of Ukraine this week too. There'll also be several other high-level meetings and summits. We'll have a pandemic preparedness summit this week. There'll also be a climate ambition summit this week too. That, of course, comes off the heels of a major march we saw in New York on Sunday. Some 20,000 people taking to the streets, demanding that the US plays more of a leading role in the fight to tackle climate change. William Denslow in New York, reporting for DD India.
Well, as William Denslow said there, thousands of protesters gathered on the streets of Manhattan on Sunday, all of that ahead of the United Nations General Assembly this week. The protest was part of the week-long international effort by the Climate Group. It's a non-profit organisation working towards climate change and global warming. The protesters waved banners in order to send a message to world leaders attending the summit so that they can save the planet from the use of oil and gas. Carbon emission reduction is a key element in fighting climate change. Well, a week after the devastating floods that hit Libya, survivors in the east coastal city of Derna are still searching for their lost family members. The mayor of Derna has stated that the death toll may reach 20,000. Streets have been ruined and buildings have been destroyed from the floods and the rains. Many homes were simply swept away, leaving residents with no shelter. Rescue personnel are now racing against time to try and search for missing people and retrieve dead bodies from the sea. Only 3,950 bodies have so far been identified by authorities. The Libya head of protection from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees is asking for support for the devastated town of Derna.
The search and rescue teams continue to try to save lives, but the situation is far from being stable at the moment. UNHCR has already provided core relief items as a first and immediate response, and we're working with our local partners to provide a lot more to try to mitigate the impact on those families who continue to suffer tremendous amount of shock. But the needs are huge and a lot more support is needed and urgent.
A prisoner swap deal has taken place between the United States and Iran, with Washington unfreezing $6 billion of Iranian oil money that was held in South Korea since 2018. The 5 Americans released by Iran are on their way to Doha right now, and then they'll fly on to the United States. Out of the 5 Iranians released by the US, 2 are set to return to Iran, while 2 will stay in the US at their request. 1 will then join his family in a third country. Russia has called on the UN's highest court in The Hague to throw out what it said was a hopelessly flawed case. The case was a challenge to Moscow's argument that its invasion of Ukraine was carried out to prevent genocide. The request from Russia was made at the start of the hearings that are dealing with the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court of Justice. Moscow also accused Ukraine of using the case as a roundabout way of getting a ruling on the overall legality of Russia's military action.
Ukraine is not accusing Russia of committing genocide. Ukraine is also not accusing Russia of failing to prevent or punish genocide. On the contrary, Ukraine insists no genocide has occurred. That alone should be enough to reject the case, because according to the court's jurisprudence, if there was no genocide, there cannot be a violation of the Genocide Convention.
Meanwhile, there seems to be no end to claims and counterclaims by Russia and Ukraine. Moscow says its forces attacked Ukrainian command posts, while Ukraine claims that it's intercepted Russian air targets. Russian forces say they repelled Ukrainian offensives in Zaporizhia, Donetsk and Luhansk, and they neutralized many military personnel and equipment. The Russian Defense Ministry says its troops hit a command post in Donetsk. It also claims the Russian air defense system intercepted several aerial bombs and anti-radar missiles from the Ukrainian side. On the other hand, Ukraine's armed forces claim that several battles have taken place in Bakhmut and Marinka in the eastern part of Ukraine over the past 24 hours. The Ukrainian Air Defense Forces claim to have intercepted many Russian air targets. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi will visit Russia from today until the 21st of September. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says that the visit will be part of the China-Russia strategic security consultations. It'll be the latest in a series of high-level visits and phone calls between the two sides. The Italian island of Lampedusa is struggling with an unprecedented surge in the arrival of migrants. As the European Commission President visited the island, she had to face anxious locals who expressed their displeasure with the large number of migrants entering the island regularly.
Amidst a surge in the arrival of migrants in Italy's Lampedusa, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen visited the Italian island on Sunday. The small island is struggling since more than 8,000 migrants have arrived over the past 3 days, with a sharp rise in the number of people arriving by boats. Nearly 126,000 migrants have arrived in Italy so far this year, almost double the figure compared to the same time period in 2022. Tensions have spiked, with residents expressing their anger due to the constant flow of migrants trying to reach Europe.
Here be the mother of people of Lampedusa. Get off your seat from where you are and come here. Not tomorrow. You should have come to Lampedusa 2 days ago.
Looking at the ongoing crisis, von der Leyen promised a 10-point EU action plan to help Italy deal with the situation. The plan will include using the EU's external border agency to identify migrants arriving in Italy and send back those not eligible for asylum.
And I want to be very clear. We have an obligation as part of the international community. We have fulfilled it in the past and we will do so today and in the future. But we will decide who comes to the European Union and under what circumstances, and not the smugglers and traffickers.
EU Chief von der Leyen was accompanied by Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and the car carrying them to the Lampedusa's Migrants Reception Centre was briefly blocked by locals protesting over the influx of migrants into the island. The Prime Minister assured the protesters that they were working on solving the problem.
We have already taken steps, which I hope they told you, and these are important interventions carried out in Lampedusa.
The surge in migrant crossings has turned into a major political problem for Giorgia Meloni, who became the Prime Minister in October 2022 and had made fighting illegal immigration a foundation of her rise to power. Amit Mukherjee, DD India.
Well, that's it from me here in Washington, D.C. Back to you, Tanvi, in the studio.
Thank you, Nick. Nick Harper joining me from Washington. You're watching DD India Global, still to come on the show. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi traces the 75-year journey of the old Indian Parliament building, pays tribute to former Prime Ministers Jawaharlal Nehru and Atal Bihari Vajpayee. And UNESCO declares India's Shantiniketan as a World Heritage Site. It houses the Vishwa Bharati University, founded by Rabindranath Tagore. Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I'm Tanvi Taneja. Next news from New Delhi. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the first day of the special session of Parliament on Monday. The 5-day session began with the Prime Minister addressing the Lok Sabha, the lower chamber of the Indian legislature. The session will shift to a new building in India's national capital from tomorrow. Prime Minister Narendra Modi dedicated the success of the G20 to 1.4 billion people of India.
G20 की सफलता 140 करोड़ देशवासियों की है। ये भारत की सफलता है, किसी व्यक्ति की सफलता नहीं है, किसी दल की सफलता नहीं है। भारत के फेडरल स्ट्रक्चर ने, भारत की विविधता ने 60 स्थानों पर 200 से अधिक समिट और उसकी मेजबानी हिंदुस्तान के अलग अलग रंग रूप में देश की अलग अलग सरकारों ने बड़े आन बान शान से की और ये प्रभाव पूरे विश्व भर के मन पर पड़ा हुआ है। ये हम सबके सेलिब्रेट करने वाला विषय है।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi further said, "It is a matter of pride for India that the African Union has become a member of the G20 under its presidency."
भारत इस बात के लिए गर्व करेगा, जब भारत अध्यक्ष रहा उस समय अफ्रीकन यूनियन इसका सदस्य बना। मैं उस इमोशनल पल को भूल नहीं सकता जब अफ्रीकन यूनियन की घोषणा हुई और अफ्रीकन यूनियन के प्रेसिडेंट उन्होंने एक इंटरव्यू में कहा कि मेरे जीवन में ऐसी पल थी शायद मैं बोलते बोलते रो पड़ूंगा। आप कल्पना कर सकते हैं कि कितनी बड़ी अपेक्षा और आशाएं पूरी करने का काम भारत के भाग्य में आया।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi got emotional as he bid farewell to the old Parliament building in New Delhi. Prime Minister also recalled the words of former Prime Ministers Jawaharlal Nehru and Atal Bihari Vajpayee and also referred to their contribution. The Indian Prime Minister shared some of his bittersweet memories associated with the old Parliament building.
ये सदन से विदाई लेना एक बहुत ही भावुक पल है। परिवार भी अगर पुराना घर छोड़कर के नए घर जाता है तो बहुत सारी यादें कुछ पल के लिए उसको झकझोर देती है। और हम जब ये सदन को छोड़ के जा रहे हैं तो हमारा मन मस्तिष्क भी उन भावनाओं से भरा हुआ है, अनेक यादों से भरा हुआ है। खट्टे मीठे अनुभव भी रहे हैं, नोकझोंक भी रही है, कभी संघर्ष का माहौल भी रहा है और कभी इसी सदन में उत्सव और उमंग का माहौल भी रहा है। ये सारी स्मृतियां हमारे साथ हम सबकी साझी स्मृतियां हैं। ये हम सबकी साझी विरासत है और इसलिए इसका गौरव भी हम सबका साझा है.
Still with India, the fourth and final framework working group meeting under India's G20 presidency has begun in Raipur, the capital of the central Indian state of Chhattisgarh. In the first session of the meet, delegates engaged in a productive conversation concerning the global economic outlook, fiscal sustainability and macro-prudential policies. Remember, India holds its G20 presidency till November of this year. And now to a fresh update from India's first solar mission called the Aditya L1. The Indian Space Agency, ISRO, on Monday said that the country's solar mission spacecraft began collecting data by deploying one of the 7 instruments on board. While sharing the mission update on X, formerly Twitter, the agency said that the sensors of the Super Thermal and Energetic Particle Spectrometer subsystem, a part of the Aditya Solar Wind Particle Experiment payload on the spacecraft, had begun measuring fast-moving charged particles generated in the processes within the Sun. This development comes a day before Aditya L1's departure from the Earth's orbit is scheduled. Now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. Moroccan Air Force, along with non-profit organizations and volunteers, are distributing aid supplies and donating vital fuels. This is a part of the ongoing disaster relief efforts in the wake of a deadly earthquake that struck the North African country a week ago. The 7.0 magnitude earthquake has killed around 3,000 people and injured over 5,600. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met Tesla's CEO Elon Musk in New York, asking him to set up a Tesla factory in Turkey. Musk stated that many Turkish suppliers are already working with Tesla and Turkey would be the next destination for its upcoming factory. The Turkish president is in the US to attend the 78th session of the UN General Assembly. Now, the demand and the prices of natural diamonds is declining this year as affordable lab-grown gems gain popularity. The synthetic diamonds have adversely affected the cost of natural diamonds as they are identical but sold at a much lower price. The global market for synthetic diamonds is projected to reach a size of $21.4 billion by 2030. A Bulgarian Navy team on Monday defused an explosive drone which landed on Sunday evening in the Black Sea town of Tulinovo. The country's defense minister assumes that the drone found on its coast is related to the Ukraine war. According to the officials, a special unit have been sent to inspect and deactivate a drone carrying explosives. And some good news now for those who cherish India's living heritage. Shantiniketan in the eastern Indian state of West Bengal is home to the Vishwa Bharati University, founded by Indian Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore. The UNESCO has now declared Shantiniketan a World Heritage Site.
Shantiniketan, associated with Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore, is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. A cultural and historical site in the Birbhum district of West Bengal, Shantiniketan became a prominent educational center after the establishment of Vishwa Bharati or World University by Tagore. Hailing the recognition, Prime Minister Narendra Modi tweeted, "Delighted that Shantiniketan, an embodiment of Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore's vision and India's rich cultural heritage, has been inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. This is a proud moment for all Indians." Shantiniketan was originally built as an ashram by Rabindranath Tagore's father, Debendranath Tagore. Vishwa Bharati, which means the communion of the world with India, was founded by Rabindranath Tagore in 1921 in the twin cities of Shantiniketan and Sriniketan. In 1951, Vishwa Bharati was declared an institution of national importance by an Act of Parliament and was given the status of a central university. Today, it is one of the most prestigious universities in India, offering courses in humanities, fine arts, performing arts, agricultural science, and rural reconstruction.
So the announcement by UNESCO of declaring Shantiniketan as a World Heritage Site has a long history. In fact, the process started a couple of years ago. Doordarshan, India's public service broadcaster, played a seminal role in it. Shantiniketan houses the Vishwa Bharati University and is considered a living heritage. A credible documentary on Shantiniketan was made by a team from Doordarshan Kendra, Kolkata, and it was shown before a UNESCO committee. And UNESCO finally decided on this honour to Shantiniketan for conferment of World Heritage Site status to laureate Rabindranath Tagore's Abode of Peace, which was set up back in 1901. So with that, it's a wrap in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at DD India Live. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja. From all of us here in New Delhi, thanks for watching. Namaskar.